I booked a table for 10. Just 10. I didn't want anything big. Just my kids, their spouses, and a couple old friends. I even printed little place cards with their names. Jack's was right at the center, next to mine. I figured he'd want to sit there, since it's been years since we actually talked, just the two of us. I sat there for 2 hours. The waitress refilled my water 4 times. I kept checking the door, the time, the group texts. Nothing. Finally, I opened Facebook and saw a live stream. Karen, my ex-wife, laughing under gold balloons. The caption said, "Best birthday ever. Thank you to my amazing kids." And there they were, all of them. Jack, Chloe, Emily, every last one of them. I spent decades running into burning buildings to pull strangers out, but my own kids wouldn't cross town for me. Not even Jack, who I once carried from a riverbank after he slipped through the ice. He doesn't remember, of course. He only remembers that I wasn't at every school play, that I missed his baseball finals, that I worked Christmas Eve. But I didn't throw that party to get applause. I threw it because I wanted to say one last thing before I disappeared from their lives completely. I just didn't expect to do it in an empty room, whispering it to myself. If you've ever wondered whether silence can break you more than shouting, stay with me. Because what happened after that night wasn't revenge. It wasn't forgiveness either. It was something no one saw coming. Mark had spent the better part of the week preparing. He'd reserved the private room at O'Malley's, the same local Irish pub where he used to take the kids for burgers after their Little League games. He knew the owner, had even helped him board up the place once during a bad winter storm. It felt right, familiar. He chose it because it was small, warm, personal. He ordered their favorite dishes ahead of time. Emily's grilled salmon, Chloe's mac and cheese. Still loved it even in her 30s. Jack's steak medium rare. He even made sure they had that weird soda Jack liked as a kid, Stewart's Orange Cream. No one sold it anymore, but Mark found it in a specialty store and had it delivered. He sat in his living room the night before, carefully writing each name on cream-colored cardstock, sliding the place cards into tiny silver holders. He printed out a few photos from their childhood, one where all 3 were in his fire helmet, grinning, back when that helmet meant something heroic to them. He arranged them in wooden frames, packing everything neatly into a canvas tote, labeled retirement, finally. He'd been dreading retirement at first. It felt like giving up. But in the last few months, he started to feel hopeful. Maybe now he could rebuild something with his kids. No more missed birthdays or firehouse emergencies keeping him away. No more excuses. Just time. The afternoon of the party, he wore his nicest flannel, tucked in, and even used a little hair product. He hadn't touched the stuff since his wedding day. Linda from the community center told him he looked 10 years younger. That made him smile. Not that he was trying to impress anyone, just didn't want to look like the guy people felt sorry for. He arrived early to help set up. The room was cozy, lined with dark wood paneling and string lights. He placed each card, each frame, each wrapped gift. Custom engraved keychains shaped like fire hydrants, each with their initials and a small quote. For every fire you face, may you always find water. Cheesy? Maybe. But it was his. By 6 p.m., everything was ready. The appetizers were out, the drinks poured. He sat at the center of the table, hands folded, waiting. He told himself they'd walk in laughing, maybe carrying balloons. Jack would slap him on the back like he used to. Chloe would run over, kiss his cheek. Emily would roll her eyes, but secretly be glad she came. But 6:15 passed. Then 6:30. The waitress asked if he wanted to start with the appetizers. He said no. They were just running late. Probably traffic. Probably a last-minute wardrobe crisis. At 6:45, he checked his phone again. Nothing. Then, at exactly 7:03, a text from Jack. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" Mark stared at it, confused. He typed and erased 3 different replies. Finally, he wrote, "Just waiting at O'Malley's. You guys still coming?" No response. Out of instinct more than anything else, he opened Facebook. The first thing on his feed was a video, a live stream. Karen was standing in her backyard, surrounded by golden balloons, holding a cake that said, "Happy 65th to the Queen." The caption read, "What a night. Thank you to my amazing kids for the best birthday ever." Mark pressed play. The video was shaky, but he recognized the voices immediately. Chloe was laughing. Emily was clinking glasses with someone. Jack, his son, stood next to Karen, raising a toast. And just like that, the air left his lungs. He sat there a moment, eyes locked on the screen. There was music, dancing. Someone brought a projector showing old family videos. A slideshow of memories, his memories, playing behind a woman who spent years erasing him from those very frames. Jack hadn't just gone to the party. He organized it. Hosted by her favorite son, the description said. Mark put his phone down gently, like it might break. Then he looked around the empty table, the flickering candles, the untouched glasses of wine, the steak growing cold in front of him. He tried to smile. He even chuckled softly, shaking his head. He told himself he was being dramatic, that maybe they didn't know, that maybe there was a mix-up. But he knew. He gathered the place cards into a neat pile, folded the napkins, and stood up. As he reached for his coat, the engraved box he'd made for Jack slipped from his hand and hit the floor, cracking open. The keychain rolled out, spinning for a second before going still at his feet. He bent down, picked it up, and for a moment just stared at it. "For every fire you face," he whispered, then tucked it back into the box. Outside, in the parking lot, he sat in his truck for a long time. The engine wasn't running. The lights were off. Just him. The hum of a distant highway, and the sound of his breath catching every few seconds. Eventually, he took off the retirement pin the department had given him. Polished brass, engraved with his years of service, and placed it in the glove compartment. Not out of anger, but because, for the first time in years, it felt meaningless. He didn't drive home right away. He just sat there, staring out at the night, waiting for the pain to fade. But it didn't. Not yet. The night after the party, Mark didn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The dim light from the street lamp outside casting long, crooked shadows on the wall. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Jack's face in that video, smiling, laughing, raising a glass in honor of the woman who made sure he never saw his father the same way again. He hadn't thought about the divorce in years. Not really. It had happened quickly, almost quietly. No shouting matches, no shattered glass or packed suitcases. Just paperwork, hushed conversations, and the slow unraveling of what used to be a life together. Back then, Mark was always at the station. Fires didn't wait for birthdays or report cards. There was always someone needing saving. And he told himself that was noble, that it justified missing dinners and school plays. That love was in the doing, not the showing. The custody hearing had taken less than an hour. Karen sat on one side of the courtroom, wearing soft colors, hands folded on the table. She told the judge Mark was a good provider, but emotionally absent, that he missed holidays, that he forgot their anniversary, that he was always working, even when he didn't have to. And then she looked directly at the judge and said, Mark may be a great firefighter, but he's not a father. Not in the ways that matter. Mark didn't object. He could have. His lawyer nudged him once, gently. But Mark just sat there, because deep down, some part of him believed it. He hadn't known how to argue for himself back then. He didn't know how to say, I was trying. I just didn't know how to be in two places at once. Jack had been 17, old enough to choose, and he chose Karen. Mark remembered the ride home after court, the silence in the truck. Jack didn't say a word, just stared out the window. When they got home, Jack walked straight to his room and started packing. That night, Mark stood outside Jack's door, gift in hand. A compass he'd carried through most of his career, something he wanted to pass down. But he never knocked. He just stood there, listening to the quiet scrape of zippers and drawers, until the door opened and Jack walked right past him. That was the last night Jack ever slept under his roof. Now, staring into the darkness of his own room, Mark wondered how that compass ended up collecting dust in his sock drawer for 15 years. How many other things? Memories, gestures, words he had meant to give, but never found the moment for. The next morning, Mark received a text from Paul, an old colleague from the station, and one of the few people still in his orbit. Hey man, it read. Saw the post from Karen's party. Thought you were doing something? Everything okay? Mark didn't reply right away, but an hour later, Paul sent a link, a Dropbox video titled Jack's Wedding, uncut footage. Mark hesitated before opening it. He'd been at the wedding, of course, sat in the back pew, gave a quiet toast, stayed out of the photos. That's what was asked of him. But as the video played, he saw something he hadn't remembered. There was a moment, brief but raw. Jack walking down the aisle, visibly nervous, and Mark standing just outside the frame, waiting. Then, unprompted, Jack turned to him. Mark stepped forward, pulled his son into a hug, and whispered something into his ear. Jack's face crumpled, overwhelmed, and for a second, he was just a boy again. Mark remembered that moment. Remembered thinking it was the first time in years Jack had really looked at him. But in the official wedding video, the one Karen had sent out, the one everyone shared, that scene didn't exist. It had been scrubbed clean, replaced by a wide shot of the guests, background noise, laughter. He sat back in his chair, breathing uneven. Who edits out something like that? The rest of the day passed in a blur. He walked around the house like a ghost, every photograph now suspect. Every memory a question mark. How many birthdays had he missed? How many had he been erased from, even when he tried? Later that evening, he opened a drawer in his study and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were envelopes, years of birthday cards, each addressed in his neat handwriting. Some had money, others had notes, all sent to Jack. He'd always wondered why Jack never mentioned them, never said thank you. But now, holding them again, he began to wonder if Jack had ever received them at all. One card still had the post office barcode intact, unopened. He flipped it over. The address was correct. But there, in Karen's unmistakable handwriting, was a note. Return to sender. Mark sat down hard, clutching the envelope. All these years, he thought Jack was just ungrateful. cold. But maybe Jack never knew. Maybe Jack had been told a different story, one where Mark never wrote, never showed up, never cared. He leaned back, eyes stinging. What if the silence between them hadn't been rejection? What if it had been rewritten? Mark stared at the blinking cursor on his laptop screen for hours before he typed the first word. He wasn't sure what pushed him over the edge. Maybe the unopened birthday cards. Maybe the video Paul had sent. Or maybe just the crushing weight of being erased. Whatever it was, it left him with the certainty that if he didn't say something now, he might never get the chance. The email wasn't easy to write. It stretched into 8 pages. He didn't try to defend himself or lay blame. He just told the truth, piece by piece, like laying bricks for a bridge that might never be walked across. He started with the custody hearing. He told them how he'd wanted to fight for shared custody, how he'd sat with a lawyer and mapped out arguments, dug up calendars and photos and firehouse schedules to prove he was more than a paycheck. But the lawyer had looked him in the eye and said, "You won't win, Mark. Not against her. You'll spend every penny you have and still lose, and the kids will get dragged through it." So he let it go. He told them about the day he lost rank at the station, when he left a low-priority call without clearance because he didn't want to miss Jack's birthday dinner. He made it just in time for cake. Jack had turned 11. No one ever knew the consequences that followed. A written reprimand, a month of desk duty. He never mentioned it because it didn't feel like something to brag about. He wrote about the cards and gifts he sent, the messages left unanswered, the holidays spent in silence. He admitted that silence became his armor, easier to wear than rejection. And then, finally, near the end, he wrote this: "I was wrong to think love could survive without being spoken. I thought being present in sacrifice would be enough. But I see now how absence breeds resentment. I was wrong to stay silent while someone else wrote the story of who I was to you. I let you believe I didn't care, and for that, I'm sorry. I never stopped being your father. I just didn't know how to keep being welcome in your lives." He sent the email separately to each of his children, personalizing the opening lines, mentioning Chloe's drawing he kept on his fridge, Emily's middle school science fair he watched from the back row, Jack's first football game where he cheered from behind the bleachers. Then he closed the laptop and waited. Days passed, then a week. Nothing. He tried not to check his inbox every morning, but he did. Tried not to expect anything, but he did. On the 14th day, a message appeared. From Jack. It was short. 3 sentences. "Dad, I got your email. I don't need explanations. What I remember is what's real for me." Mark read it twice, then a third time, hoping maybe he'd missed something, some hidden softness in the words. But there was none. It was cold, detached, final. He sat back, stomach hollowed out, wondering if maybe that was the last real chance he'd ever get. And then, just as he was about to close his inbox, another message appeared. From Chloe. Her email was longer. Not as long as his, but enough to matter. "I remember one year, 6th grade, I think. Mom said you forgot my birthday. Said you never called. But I found a card in the mailbox a week later. It had a tiny drawing inside. Our stick figure family with your fire helmet on top. I never told her I found it. I still have it." She attached a photo of the card. Faded edges, childish doodles, a small red heart drawn in crayon. "I don't know what's true anymore," Chloe wrote, but I don't think I want to stay mad." Mark didn't realize he was crying until he felt the wet spots on his shirt. Not from sorrow, but from something that felt like air rushing into a space long starved of oxygen. It wasn't redemption. Not yet. But it was the start of something that didn't feel like erasure. He reread both emails that night, Jack's and Chloe's, and for the first time, he stopped trying to change what was. One child still shut the door. Another had left it cracked open. He didn't need to rush in, but now he knew where to knock. The art class met every Thursday evening in the back room of the community center. Mark had signed up on a whim after seeing a flyer in the grocery store. He hadn't picked up a paintbrush since high school, but something about the quiet rhythm of it, mixing colors, brushing across canvas, felt like a kind of peace he hadn't known he needed. That's where he met Linda. She was soft-spoken, in her early 60s, with gray-streaked hair tied back in a loose braid. Her paintings were small, always of houses, old farmhouses, some falling apart, others surrounded by trees that looked like they were hugging the walls. One evening, as they both cleaned brushes at the sink, she said, "I paint the homes I wish I'd had." It didn't take long for their conversations to deepen. She told him about her late husband, her stepchildren who stopped calling after the funeral. "People disappear when the ties weren't real," she said once, not bitterly, just as a matter of fact. Mark shared pieces of his story too. The party, the email, the silence. They began sitting together during class, then grabbing coffee after. One night, over lukewarm tea and leftover muffins, Linda looked at him and said, "You're not a bad father, Mark. You were just quiet too long." And other people filled the silence with their own stories. It wasn't meant as comfort. It was clarity, a diagnosis, more than a balm. A few weeks later, she came to his house for the first time. He showed her the wooden box in his study, dusty but intact. Inside were photos, handwritten notes, copies of tuition payments, medical bills, birthday receipts, evidence, proof. But more than that, it was love made tangible. "You've been archiving your love," Linda said softly, lifting one of Chloe's childhood drawings from the pile. "But what good is love in a locked drawer?" She helped him sort through everything. They organized it by child. 3 folders, each thick with pieces of a story never told. At the bottom of the box was a flash drive Mark had forgotten about. He plugged it into his laptop. A grainy video played. It was snowing. A frozen lake. Children laughing. Then chaos. Jack, 9 years old, had stepped too far onto the ice. It cracked beneath him, and he vanished in seconds. The video, shot by a family friend, caught Mark sprinting, diving into the freezing water, dragging Jack out, wrapping his coat around him. Jack was coughing, shivering, crying. Mark's face was pale, lips blue, but he held Jack like he would never let go. The clip was only 40 seconds, but it said everything. Mark stared at the screen. He remembered that day vividly. The fear, the cold, the way Jack had clung to him. He also remembered how Karen had told everyone it wasn't that serious. That Jack had slipped, yes, but Mark had overreacted. He had believed her silence was protection. Now he saw it differently. "You need to send this," Linda said. "It's not about defending yourself. It's about giving them back the missing pages." So he did. He copied the photos, the receipts, the letters, and the video onto new flash drives, one for each child. He included a short note. "This isn't to change your mind. It's just what I never got to say, what I never got to show." If you want to know me, this is where I've been. A week later, Chloe called. She didn't say much, just that she got it. That she cried watching the video. That she wished she'd asked more questions when she was younger. 2 days after that, Mark received a text from Jack. Just one line. I never knew. That night, Mark and Linda sat on the back porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun drop behind the trees. I don't think I need them to love me the way I hoped, Mark said quietly. I just need them to know I was there. Linda squeezed his hand. They're starting to. The email arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Mark almost deleted it, thinking it was another newsletter or an ad. But the subject line made his hand pause. Graduation, if you're free. It was from Jack. The message was short. No greeting, no apology. Just, if you're free next Saturday, we'd like you to come to Lily's graduation. It's at the Civic Center, 3 p.m. There was no dad, just you. And yet, Mark read it 5 times, heart thudding. He told Linda that evening over dinner. She offered to go with him, but he shook his head. I think I need to do this one alone. The Civic Center buzzed with people that Saturday. Banners hung from the ceiling. Students lined up in caps and gowns. Families crowded the aisles with flowers, balloons, loud cheers. Mark stood near the back, gripping the invitation in his coat pocket like it might vanish. Then he saw them. Jack, Chloe, Emily, all seated in the front row, with Karen right in the middle. Cameras were already set up, 2 professional rigs aimed at the crowd. He took a seat 5 rows behind, trying to blend in. No one turned to greet him, not even Jack. Just a few sideways glances. He thought maybe he'd misread the invite. Maybe it wasn't meant to include a welcome. When the ceremony ended, a woman with a headset approached him. Mr. Weller, we'd like to get a quick shot of you with your granddaughter for the family reel. He froze. What reel? Karen's video team. It's a short doc, 3 generations of strength. She said you'd agreed. Mark didn't answer. Instead, he turned and looked at the stage. Jack was already standing there with Karen, smiling at the camera, holding Lily's diploma. Someone beckoned him forward. His feet didn't move. He walked out of the Civic Center, the invitation still crumpled in his pocket. Not a word to anyone. Not a goodbye. Not even a glance back. He drove home in silence. No music. No calls. Linda was out gardening when he returned. She saw his face and didn't ask a single question. That night, he didn't eat, didn't sleep. He sat on the porch until the sky shifted from blue to black and then to dawn. It felt like an ending, but it wasn't. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not an email, a real letter, in a plain white envelope with Jack's name in the corner. Mark opened it slowly, expecting formality, maybe an explanation. But it wasn't that. It was handwritten, a little shaky, a little unsure. Dad, I didn't know they were filming. I didn't even know you were sitting in the back until I saw the raw footage later. I never meant for that to happen. I'm sorry, really. The video of the lake, the one where you pulled me out. I watched it 10 times, maybe more. I don't remember it happening. I guess I blocked it out. Or maybe Mom's version always took over. I've been angry for a long time. I thought I hated you. But the truth is, I hated the way I felt left behind. I hated not understanding why you weren't there. I hated that Mom gave me all the answers and I never asked for yours. But watching that video, I saw your face. The fear, the love. It hit me hard. I didn't just see a firefighter. I saw my father. I don't know how to fix everything, but I'd like to try. if you're willing. Mark stood in the kitchen, holding the letter with both hands, his vision blurring. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like something had cracked open. Something honest, unpolished, and human. The kind of beginning only truth could make. The evening air was soft, just warm enough for the windows to stay open. Linda had set the table on the screened porch, dressing it with mismatched plates and garden flowers in jam jars. There was no photographer, no decorations, no speeches. Just roast chicken, cornbread, and the clinking of silverware against plates. Mark stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping outside, taking in the sight that once felt impossible. Chloe was helping Linda pour lemonade into glasses. Emily was laughing with her daughter about the cat trying to steal a bread roll. And Jack was sitting at the head of the table, arms folded loosely, watching it all with a quiet stillness that looked too much like Mark's own. Mark joined them. No fanfare, just a space that had been made for him, open and waiting. They ate slowly, talked about ordinary things, work, school, how tall the kids were getting. Chloe told a story about her son breaking the toaster with a plastic fork. Emily chimed in with her own about a camping trip gone wrong. Laughter rolled down the table like a breeze. Mark didn't say much. He didn't need to. The silence wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't heavy. It simply belonged. Later, after dessert, pecan pie with too much cinnamon, exactly how Chloe liked it. Jack stood up, reached into his coat pocket, and placed a small frame on the table. It was a photo. Old, faded at the corners. Mark recognized it immediately. He and Karen on their wedding day. She was beaming in lace and pearls, and he looked absurdly young in his dress blues, one hand resting protectively on her lower back. Between them, barely visible, was a shadow. Jack, peeking from behind his mother's skirt. "I found this cleaning out the attic," Jack said. "I almost threw it away, but then I looked closer." He tapped the photo. "And I realized you were always there. I just didn't see it." Mark felt the table fall silent, the world narrow. Jack looked at him then, directly, for the first time in years. "You were the best part of her. I think that's what scared her most." No one spoke for a moment, not because they didn't know what to say, but because some things don't need responding. Mark nodded once, softly, then picked up his glass of water and took a sip, trying to keep his hand from shaking. Linda cleared the dishes while the kids helped fold napkins. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the porch. Fireflies began their quiet dance near the hedge. Then Chloe said, "Didn't you write a speech once? For that retirement dinner?" Mark chuckled. It was more of a ramble than a speech. "We'd like to hear it," Emily said. Mark hesitated. He hadn't looked at it since that night, since the empty table and untouched steak. But now, with the porch glowing in the soft gold of twilight, and the people he loved finally gathered, it felt like the right time. He stepped inside, returned with a folded sheet of paper. It was wrinkled, a little yellowed at the edges. He unfolded it, cleared his throat, and began. "I've spent my life walking into flames. That was the job. Put yourself between danger and someone else. Make it home alive. Do it again the next day. What I didn't realize back then was that fire takes many forms. Some are loud, obvious. Others are quiet, slow. They creep into the spaces between people and burn what they don't say. I used to think I failed, that I didn't do enough, that I wasn't enough. But I see now that love doesn't disappear. It doesn't vanish when it's ignored or misunderstood. It waits. It waits to be seen, to be named. I didn't throw that party last year because I wanted applause. I threw it because I wanted you to know that I was always proud, that I was always watching, even from the back row, that I was always there, even if you didn't see me. And now, tonight, I'm glad it didn't happen then. Because this, right here, is the only audience I ever needed. He folded the paper slowly. No applause, no tears, just stillness, and something deeper, recognition. As the stars began to fill the sky, Chloe leaned over, resting her chin on her palm. "Dad," she said, smiling, "would you ever write a book?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "A book?" "Yeah," she said, "so I can tell my kids the story of how their grandfather came back." He looked at her, then at Jack, then Emily. They weren't asking for forgiveness anymore. They were asking for legacy. He leaned back in his chair, eyes soft, heart full. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe I already have."